I'm just live streaming so that you can. Okay, guys. So here you have it being live streamed. So, okay. Now let us look at the word situational language teaching. In your undergraduate classes, you might have been introduced to communicative English. That is an approach, and the communicative English also approach is also based on situation. So you're given situations. You might recall that you were given a situation at the reception desk of a hotel. How do you check in? Checking in, checking out. Then at the bank, how do you converse with the bank at the bank? How do you make your inquiries? How do you speak to a travel agent about booking a ticket? So these are different situations that we are given, context that you're given, and you are asked to uh, make an attempt to speak. Right now, think about people who are traveling abroad. Okay, if they're going abroad, then um, they also try to pick up some vocabulary that they need for the hotel, they need for getting onto the metro, buying their tickets, and inquiring the about locations, right? Um Now, these are all several examples of the situational approach, right? And when I was a student, and in our ELT classes, our teachers used to emphasize one thing. They used to say, speech is primary. Speech is primary. How did you learn your own language, whether it's Urdu or Tamil or Malayalam or whatever? How did you learn? Were you um taught reading, or were you taught um, writing first, or did you learn to speak?
First, ma'am.
Speak. Speech came first, right? So that is obvious. So the oral approach and situational approach, if the title itself is self-explanatory. Wait, I have to make myself co-host. So I said speech is primary, and then I also said that in situations where you are learning a language, you are given situations or you look for situations. If you are a tourist, you visualize the situations you will be in and you prepare yourself for that. You prepare, don't you learn to say thank you in a foreign language? Don't you learn to small ways of befriending people, asking, how are you? Or even the basic rudiments that you need for shopping and things like that. So whether you go to when you go to France, you will learn to say merci for everything. Merci means thank you. Like that, you pick up a few words, and this is a classic example of situational learning at the ground level. Now, there are two ELT theoreticians who are pioneers in this. They are Harold Palmer and A.S. Hornby. Now, this Palmer and Hornby, they have written several grammar books, and the grammar books of Palmer and Hornby are very have many exercises in situational language learning, lots of grammar drills. Mhm. Yeah. So if I share my screen here, you will see that. Can you see the books by Hornby?
Yes, ma'am.
So there's this important book, a grammar book, a guide to patterns and usage in English. I remember using that book, a very useful book, right? A guide to patterns and usage in English. A.S. Hornby. And then you also have Palmer, Harold Palmer. Harold Palmer's phonetics, yeah, yeah, oral English, the teaching of oral English. Can you see that? And then the oral methodology in teaching languages. If you look at the dates, 1877 to 1949, and Hornby, 1898, he comes 20 years later after Palmer, to 1978. Um, and their predecessors were Otto Jespersen and Daniel Jones. So Otto Jespersen and Daniel Jones followed the direct method in teaching. And when we were college students, we used to follow Daniel Jones' book of phonetics. See, nowadays you have the phonetics, uh, available online. If you want to check pronunciation, uh, you will just log in, you will key in and check the pronunciations available on YouTube. But not so in our time when we didn't have in English, when we didn't have internet. And so we learned phonetics. We learned phonetics. We learned so phonetics, and we would look at Daniel Jones' dictionary. Daniel Jones Dictionary. Daniel Jones Pronunciation Dictionary. That was a Bible for our phonetics. Okay. Uh, yeah. See, Daniel Jones, Everyman's English Pronunciation Dictionary. Now you have many Cambridge pronunciation dictionaries, but those days the English pronunciation dictionary by Daniel Jones was was the English student's Bible, right? You can see it here. And now this book is archived also. So if you open the book, you will see. Can you see?
Yes, ma'am.
Uh, okay, need an account to open this, but he would give all the uh, phonetic script of the words. So the predecessors of uh, Daniel, of Harold Palmer and Hornby were Otto Jespersen and Daniel Jones. This is something you should remember. We try to make a PPT. Hold on. Now, and I have to tell you something about the direct method. You would have learned already about the different methods, audiolingual, communicative, right? Now, the direct method is the method where who are learning English, students of English as a foreign language, English as a second language, they are made to learn like native speakers of English. So, what do we mean by that? So, just the way a child born to British parents or American parents uh, learns English, in the same way, a student of uh, English as the second language is made to learn. And this is what was practiced in all the so called English medium schools. And you find that in English medium schools, they would tell the children in school, you should not talk in Tamil. All right. So, when children are told that they should not speak in their native language, they should speak only in English in the learning environment. So, there's no translation at all. That you should notice. There's no translation. It is like being pushed into the water and told that you should swim, right? So let's go back and look at who are the theorists, the language theorists in this, to whom we owe the oral and situational approach. It began with Otto Jespersen.
Ma'am, we couldn't hear properly, ma'am.
Begins with auto yes person. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Then goes to Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones. And then Harold Palmer. Then A.S. Hornby. Can you see the screen now? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
And as I told you, like this is the sequence. So Harold Palmer, 1877 to 49, Hornby, 1898 to 78. And Hornby, 1898 to 78. Now, these dates are important because you see, especially in relation to Hornby, the Second World Wars, the First and the Second World War. He's a person who has witnessed two wars. And these are the years of migration of human beings, of people. So it's also the period of colonization. British people settling in Africa, settling in um, Australia, the British dominion in India. So, and that is why how English had to be taught was a concern. And in the period of, Palmer, Jones, Jesperson, the inclination towards the direct method was very strong, that they have to learn English uh, without any support of translation or anything like that. They should just be exposed to the language, and they should be made to learn the language in an English speaking environment. That is what we mean by the direct approach. Um, Now, you must remember that this direct approach uh, and this is this emphasis on grammar by Hornby and Palmer is heavily researched, right? They've done a lot of research. And so another thing I'm is direct method. So, what were they researching about? They were researching about the selection and organization of the content of a language course. So, very important here was selection and organization of content of a language course. So, as I told you, in Hornby and Palmer, they gave importance to grammar. Um, so, three things that are important in any any theory, okay, whether it's a communicative approach or whether it's the direct method or whether it's the audio lingual method, you have the approach, you have the theory of learning, you have the design. So see, in the next chapter also you have the audio lingual method, and first you have the approach, theory of learning, and the design. So we looked at the approach, theory of learning, and the design in the oral and situational learning method. Um, Now, every approach involves a theory of language. So, what do you think about language? What is language? How do you theorize on language? So, in relation to the situational language teaching, the theory of language is um, characterized as structuralism. So, that is why you see uh, Harold and Palmer, they gave so much importance to grammar. They wrote grammar textbooks. So they researched a lot about the structure of the language and they wrote grammar books. And so the theoretical foundation, theoretical basis of the situational and language and um, oral and situational approach is structuralism. So underlying every language is the grammatical structures. It's a it's an obvious thing, but it needs to be mentioned. Grammar is a term that we can use not only in relation to English language or any language, but grammar is a term that you can use in relation to anything. Now, students, it's, sports is a language, music is a language, art is a language. Would you agree with me? Would you agree with me? If I say music is a
Yes,
language,
ma'am.
yes. So you may say the grammar of sports. That's nothing wrong in saying the grammar of sports. It's because there's a structure. The grammar of music, there's a structure. The grammar of art, there you can talk about it. There's because there's a structure. Did you get me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So here in this oral and situational learning, the foundation, the theory of language was structuralism. Structuralism, you've learned about Derrida. He's a post-structuralist. All right. So structuralism is the progression of formalism in the literary theory. You have that whole genealogy of literary theory, beginning with formalism, Russian formalists and Roman Jakobson. Then you have the structuralists, and the structuralists actually. You have the very well-known structuralist Levi Strauss. Now, Levi Strauss was an anthropologist. He studied communities, right? And structuralism is a philosophy that is there in the study of culture and language. So, girls, I always say that English language teaching is not divorced from literature. It's part of our literary studies because it involves a lot of thinking and engagement with the theory of language. All right. So, literary theory is cannot be divorced from the theory of language. So there are, and rather theories of language, so many theories of language. So here the theory that they rely on is structuralism, and hence the importance to grammar. So, when we say that they were so grounded in structuralism and they relied on grammar, that is why they had these oral drills, they had these oral exercises. All right. I remember reading one novel where a Jewish person was trying to learn English grammar, and he was in the bathroom also. He was practicing the participles: drive, drove, driven, strive, strove, striven, uh, no, give, gave, given, like that. So, don't we, people who are trying to master a language will practice these structures. And uh, then, as I said, the direct method, they felt that they should be have the kind of exposure that a British child would have, and almost the near native uh, experience in learning the language. So speaking is important. Okay. So the more they speak, the more they are in situations where they have to speak, the more they are going to acquire the language. And let me tell you that no one approach, oral approach or communicative approach or audiolingual approach, is um, exclusive or is the only method. When you are a practicing teacher, you will find that all methods are valuable and that you will take the best of every method. You cannot swear by one method. Am I right, Aisha?
Ma'am.
Did you understand? We can get the best from every method.
Yes, ma'am.
See, audiolingual method will give a lot of importance to listening, right? Communicative method would give importance to communication, the two-way, acknowledging that communication is a two-way process, and there again, a lot of importance to speech. So all these methods overlap. There's no doubt about that. So speech was regarded as the basis of um, language learning, and structure was viewed as being at the heart of the speaking ability. It's obvious, isn't it? Children speak fluently, but they cannot read or they cannot write. How is it they are able to produce structures of the language perfectly? Because they listen, because they have been speaking, they keep practicing speaking. So, as I said, speech is primary, and these in this method they give importance to speaking, and they reinforce structures through speaking exercises. So there is a reinforcement of structures through speaking exercises. Mhm. Speaking. Did you get that? Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So when they had this kind of theory of language, see, when you have an approach, you have theory of language, and then you have the theory of learning. So theory of language would be, what is language? Okay, language is a set of structures, and here they have a theory of learning. And yeah, so in an approach, you have the theory of language and you have the theory of learning. Now, the theory of learning states that their approach is behaviorist, habit formation. So by making them repeat structures. So repeat structures like uh, Ram ate an apple. Jill ate an orange. So the same structure being used through different just by replacing a noun, the name of the boy or girl, the person who ate, and what they ate. But the structure it remains the same. Uh, so a teacher who is using this approach would say there were five fruits on the table: an apple, an orange, a papaya, a banana, uh, and a mango. There were five children, each took one fruit. The children's names are Jill, James, Shruti, Ashwin, Ria. Can you tell me what Ria ate? If someone says Ria ate a mango. Okay, so the mango has gone. So what do you think Ashwin ate? Ashwin ate an apple. So the mango and the apple have gone. And what is left? Uh, what did you think the other person ate? He took a banana. So so and so ate. Jill ate a banana. So like that, the structure is practiced. Now, well, there in psychology, there are um, two approaches. Okay, so if it's not behaviorist, okay, the opposite of the behaviorist approach is cognitive. Okay, all right. So behaviorist, cognitive. Now, um, cognition is understanding. Okay, behaviorist is like you are made to do it repeatedly and you do it. So you must have heard about the experiment relating to Pavlov's dogs. Now, Pavlov's dogs, uh, Pavlov used to give food to the dogs after ringing a bell. So he rings the bell, the dogs come to the place where he gives the food, he serves the food. And later on, whenever he rang the bell, he would find that the dog started salivating, drooling. The mouth was becoming wet because they were so hungry. And he kept an empty plate, but the dogs were salivating. So this is one experiment in behaviorism. Right? So as I told you, psychologists use two approaches. One is the behaviorist approach, and the other is the cognitive approach. Aisha, what are the two approaches?
Behavior approach and cognitive approach.
Behaviorist approach and so
Cognitive.
behavioral or cognitive. So the oral and situational learning uses dash approach. Which approach? Which approach do they use? The
Oral.
oral, no. So what is it, a cognitive approach or a behaviorist?
Oral.
Ma'am, it is behaviorist
It is
approach.
behaviorist because it relies on habit formation, language learning as habit formation. Okay. And then there's also an inductive approach. Uh, how is another word for inductive is also deductive. You deduce. So if you're given these structures repeatedly, yes, you form a habit, but the habit is not dead habit. It's not entirely mechanical. In your mind, you try to recognize structures. You recognize structures. So there's an element of cognition. There's an element of understanding, and uh, so it is also an inductive approach. So they don't give explanation about the structures, all right, but the it is to be induced from the way the form is used in a situation. Explanation is therefore discouraged, and the learner is expected to deduce the meaning of a particular structure or vocabulary. Deduce the meaning. So that is where you see here again, it is so much reliant on the direct method, right? Because they have to induce. So in this situation, in the classroom, especially when teaching vocabulary, they will not give the Tamil or Malayalam or Hindi equivalent to the child. Uh, so when the teacher speaks and repeatedly uses certain words and sentences and structures, the student understands. So when the teacher says, sit, I want all of you to sit down. So maybe she makes a gesture, sit down, and her tonal variation. The teacher doesn't have to explain ukar, nil. That is not there in the oral and situational approach because it relies on the direct method in which there's no translation. So the way the teacher says, sit down, the students understand what they're supposed to do and they sit down. And when the teacher says stand up, they stand up. So they are not given their uh, vernacular equivalent of sit and stand. Okay, so when you come to design, design means syllabus. So in um, this, when you take this kind of approach, the in the syllabus you have basically, girls, whichever approach you take, vocabulary, grammar, right? In or another word for vocabulary and grammar, another word, lexis and syntax. So you can use the term lexis, which means vocabulary or vocabulary, and then grammar. Just think about what are the basic things you are going to teach anybody. If you have to boil it down to what item you are going to teach, we may have stories, we may have poems, we may have plays, may have so many texts. But from the text, ultimately, what are we going to teach? Vocabulary, grammar. Is there anything else apart from vocabulary and grammar? Yes or no?
No, ma'am.
No. So, um, so if you look at your textbook, they would have a chart, a kind of chart where you have the sentence pattern and then the vocabulary. In the first lesson, you have this is a book, a pencil, a ruler, a desk. That is a book, a pencil, a ruler, a desk. These are pencil, chairs, pictures. Those are, is this, right? So, in other words, they will uh, introduce person, first person, second person, third person, singular, plural, and how structures vary according to tense, person, okay, tense and person. The structure will vary according to the tense and the person, whether it's I or we, you or they, he, she or it. That's person. Whether it is present, present continuous, present perfect, or past, past continuous, past perfect, right? Or future tense. The verb, any verb is like the human face. The human face expression changes. Anger, happiness, everything is seen on this face. So when the tense changes from simple present to past, walk, walk, becomes walked, walked, and in the continuous it would be walking, ing. So that change takes place, right? uh, Due to an inflection, just that those the ed, ing are inflections. Now the syllabus is not a syllabus in which there's a list of situations and language associated with them. Rather, situation refers to the manner of presenting and practicing sentence patterns. The word situation is understood as encompassing such areas as pictures or realia, actions, and drills, as we will explain. Now, this is one thing we should learn in relation to what the word situational means in situational learning. When I set out, I said we have learned English in different situations, like at the bank, at the hotel. And this is more followed in the communicative English context, where they give you a situation in which you have to use a certain uh, pattern of speech. But in the case of the oral and situational approach, the word situation is understood as encompassing such areas as pictures. So, what is used in the class? You understand? To teach. So let's look a little bit at design. The design, in other words, is syllabus. And in this syllabus, we have structural syllabus. You have a you have this. The use of this is, that is, these are, those are, is this, is that, this is a book, pencil, that is the same thing. These are books, pencils. Those are books, pencils. So you see how they are drawing attention to structure. And then in my earlier slide, I said syntax or grammar. lexis or vocabulary. So these are the things that are taught in the syllabus: vocabulary and grammar. And this is a very important point. What does the word situation mean? So, situation in SLT, situational learning and teaching, is not a situational syllabus in the sense that this term is sometimes used. That is a list of situations and the language associated with them. As I told you earlier, when this, at the bank, at the reception, this is there in the communicative approach. Situation situations are given in the communicative approach, but in the situational language teaching, situation rather refers to. Oh, sorry. So here your textbook says rather situation refers to the manner of presenting and practicing sentence patterns. The word situation is understood as encompassing such areas as pictures or realia. What do you mean by realia in the classroom? Teachers might bring objects. They might bring an apple and then cut the apple into many pieces, and they may uh, illustrate some vocabulary through that. The way paring an apple, that means removing the skin. So the teacher may remove the skin of the apple and say, I'm paring the apple. Okay. I'm Then she may she may say, I'm cutting it into slices. I have to share one apple by 10 children. So I cannot make pieces. I will make slices. Okay. Thin slices. So then she introduces the adjective thin. So pieces, slices, thin slices, right? So that is using realia. Realia actions. As I said, when the way the teacher tells the students, sit down, sit down. I want all of you to sit down. That itself helps the students to understand that they have to sit. I want you to stand up. Please stand up. So the gestures, actions, uh, and drills. Drills are what we saw earlier, substituting. Ram ate a mango, Sita ate a banana, Ravi ate a pineapple. Yeah. Then you have types of learning and teaching activities, learner roles, teacher roles. you will always come across this teaching bar learning in ELT, because the methodology is mm, involves the learner. Learner and teacher are mm, are essential in that situation. You cannot have one without the other. So uh, teaching is being done, learning takes place. So as we said earlier, the types of learning, you have the drill based, practicing again and again. And I've explained what is meant by situation, objects, pictures, realia, gestures, right? So now we have to look at the learner roles and the teacher roles. See, teaching and learning is like a clap, hand clap. Both should come together. You can't have a clap without two hands coming together. So it takes a kind of effort on both sides, teacher and the learner. So what does the learner have to do? Learner has to, in the initial stages, listen and repeat. Yes. Um, and here, the control is by the teacher. The student cannot say, I don't want to learn this, I don't want to. The teacher decides, or rather, teacher decides what has to be, uh, decides how, what, and how the what is learned and how it is learned. So this you will not see in the communicative approach. So it is just a series of commands. So the teacher says, do this, do that, bring the pen. So if how does the teacher check the comprehension? Can you bring me a pen? So the student will bring a pen, right? The teacher doesn't give the student an opportunity to express what he wants in his own way. Uh, the in a situational learning classroom, definitely a teacher will not say, "Can you tell me something about yourself?" You can uh, give me the words in your own language. If you do not know the words in English, you tell me the words in your own language. I will help you with the English word. This definitely will not happen in a situational language learning class. In a situational language learning class, they will be given structures. So even to introduce yourself, you will be given a sentence full of sentence patterns. My name is, I come from, uh, my occupation is. So, or each and every student in the class will utter their introduction in that pattern. Good morning, my name is so and so. I come from so and so place. Um, I am studying this. Okay, so those fixed structures are given. So the teacher control is there. That's what I'm trying to say. Well, what if a student makes mistakes? Uh, if a student makes mistakes in grammar or pronunciation, uh, these are addressed later. So initially, the control is by the teacher. Later on, active participation by the student comes. So you see the teacher control. The teacher's function is threefold. The In the presentation stage of the lesson, the teacher serves as a model, setting up situations in which the need for the target structure is created, and then modeling the new structure for the students to repeat. Then the teacher becomes more like a skillful conductor of an orchestra, drawing the music out of the performers. The teacher is required to be a manipulator using questions, command, and cues to elicit correct sentences from the learners. So here the teacher is uh, who uses questions and commands. Commands and cues. What's a cue? Cue is like a cue, a prompt. When you're doing a play, drama, you have to remember your lines. And then if your friends who are backstage think you are forgetting some lines or you don't remember the lines, they may just give you a hint. So that's called a cue. They may tell you one word, the beginning, the first word of the sentence, and then you remember the rest and you utter it. So that's what we mean by cue. The teacher gives cues, gives commands and questions. Like I said, if the teacher says sit down, with a gesture, stand up, stand up, sit down. So in other words, the situations are controlled. It's a very controlled situation. Okay, then pronunciation. Pittman's exercises gave a lot of importance to pronunciation. Pronunciation, then revision, presentation, oral practice, reading of material in the new structure, written exercises. So they are trained in pronunciation. This is oral exercise. Oral practice of phrases and sentences. Then writing practice. There you have just exercises, grammar. In, in, in some in certain structures. Then reading of material on the new structure or written. the PPP format. The PPP format. So, what are the three P's? Presentation, practice, production. So, in the this PPP is there in all the methods. So in presentation, you have a text or an audio or a visual is used by the teacher to present the grammar in a controlled situation. So what do you mean by this? You might see a lot of these type of videos on the YouTube for children. So they will have um, uh, remember the song that children sing, with my hand on my hips. What is this here? This is my nutcracker, this eye blinker, dear. Then what is this here? What is this? So the body parts that they children learn, or let's think of any other rhyme. Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. So if you look at those, so sat on a wall, had a great fall. So these structures are there, and a text or a visual is used by the teacher to present the grammar in a controlled situation. Okay, let's imagine the teacher using a small video to teach the use of how much and how many. So you have a video of a grocery shop, all right, and then you have mangoes, apples, uh, bananas, and you have rice, sugar. So when she looks, she points to the rice. She says, "How uh, how how much is 1 kilo of rice? How many apples are there in 1 kilo?" Right? So the shopkeeper will ask, "How many apples do you want? How much rice do you want?" Right? So they have this kind of videos, audio visuals, texts, where they use which they use to teach a certain structure. Similarly, singular and plural. Uh, they show one apple, apple, and add one more apple. There's apples, and then write on the board apple, and then add an S and say apples. Banana, add one more banana to the visual and say bananas. Add an S. So these are ways of presenting. Then practice. A controlled practice phase follows. So this repeating. So going on repeating what the teacher says. And the practice here is very specific. You have closed test. What's a closed test? Fill in the blanks, that type of test. Close activities. gap fill, I mean, fill, we call it fill in the blanks, and drills and multiple choice questions. Drills, MCQs, right? Multiple choice. So this is the type of practice. And then production. Production is speaking on your own. So how do they go about production in the SLT approach? Learners transfer the structure to freer communication through dialogues and other activities where there is more than one correct answer. So there is an element of free play in production. You cannot avoid it. You cannot make them speak in structures all the time. Okay. So there is some element of free expression is there. So let me go back to two important items which I didn't emphasize because I wanted to give you an you have vocabulary selection, grammar, control. I explained that the two items that we are going to teach in any approach are lexis, vocabulary, and syntax, grammar. All right. Apart from this, what else do we have in language? So, in the case of the oral and situational approach, vocabulary is selected. That is the important thing. So, there's a vocabulary selection, and there is also grammar control. Mm, in fact they would have there was something called basic English where they would have word lists in relation to levels of learning, right? So this was um, part of vocabulary selection. And in your textbook, you have that this practice of vocabulary selection in language teaching is there from the 1920s, 30s. And Palmer uh, believed that vocabulary was one of the most important aspects of foreign language teaching. And then you have the Coleman report, all right, uh, which also stated that vocabulary is an important part of reading proficiency. Palmer, Coleman report, all these emphasized the importance of grammar, of vocabulary. So they did, these people, Palmer, Hornby, they did a lot of research, right? And they had vocabulary selection. And in 1953, West, all right, Palmer, West, Palmer, West. West is also one of. So this West, he presented, West compiled a book called A General service list of English words. You know, at one point of time, Ogden also wrote a book called Basic English. He had this list of books which he said are basic English. So look at the date. So this is after World War II. You know, the World War, French, British, they were meeting each other, people of different nationalities, people from the colonies, India, Africa, working alongside the British soldiers and British generals and all that. So English was how to learn English, how to teach English was a primary concern. And these researchers put together a list of words that anybody should know. A general service list means it's like a manual. You have to know these words. Now, grammar, Palmer studied a lot the problems of grammar for the foreign learner, and much of his work was in Japan, where he directed the Institute for Research in English Language Teaching from 1922 to World War II. And here he worked on developing classroom procedures suited to teaching basic grammatical patterns through an oral approach. So farmers work in Japan, 1920s to World War II. And of course, you know, it is a structural approach, and it's Palmer to whom we attribute our grounding in the SVO pattern. Right? And this SVO pattern further developed into a more complex structures based on analysis, based on his research. So I am happy that I was able to catch some time to teach you about the oral and situational approach. And I hope that you have been able to grasp the essence of this approach. Shall we close for now? Yes. Thank you, students.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.